श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादशङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्। त्वमेव माता च पिता त्वमेव बन्धुश्च सखा त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव सर्वं मम देवदेव। श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तिसुदेशिकेन्द्रं द्वैपायनं सूत्रकृतं मुनीन्द्रं श्रीशङ्करं भाष्यकृतं यतीन्द्रं मद्देशिकञ्चापि नमामि विद्यै। ॐ नमो ब्रह्मादिभ्यो ब्रह्मविद्यासम्प्रदायकर्तृभ्यो वंशऋषिभ्यो महद्भ्यो नमो गुरुभ्यः। सर्वोपप्लवरहितप्रज्ञानगणः प्रत्यगर्तो ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि। Pranams everyone. So in this introduction to Vedanta, we started with what are the human goals, and the human goals are four: Artha, Kama, Dharma and Moksha. Moksha is the ultimate goal, the final goal that every one of us will have to reach one day. And we saw that is the only final goal that can be, because any other goal has got its own limitations, has got its own doshas, will not give us the happiness that we are looking for. Artha and Kama can give temporary happiness, but will never be able to give us permanent happiness, everlasting happiness. And for everlasting happiness, it can be only moksha. Even dharma cannot give us everlasting happiness. So, for that we have this shastras, and we saw shastras to be 6 layered. And then the shastras also gave us the infrastructure for us to pursue these goals. Although we cannot be full time on moksha right now. So for pursuing all the goals, shastras were laid out an infrastructure, which is the varna and ashrama schemes. Varna at the social level, ashrama at the individual level. So from a ashrama stage, you have brahmacharyam, grahastha, vanaprastha and sannyasi. And typically at the brahmacharya stage, the person reads the shastras, understands the roadmap, understands what is expected of each stages, and then moves to the next stage, which is grahastha. At the grahastha stage, he follows one major sadhana, which is called karma yoga. And as a result of karma yoga, he will get chitta shuddhi. Chitta shuddhi meaning pure mind. And then he moves to the next stage, which is vanaprastha, where he follows upasana yoga. Upasana yoga is about getting the mind focused. So a clean mind now becomes more focused. So it becomes a strong mind. And then at the sannyasi stage, he has to follow jnana yoga as his major sadhana. So at each stages, there is one major sadhana, and there are the other sadhanas which have to be practiced along with that. So typically in the grahastha ashrama right now, we are also, whatever we are doing now is called as jnana yoga. So this is a sadhana that has to be followed so at every stage of life there is one major sadhana, and the other 2 sadhanas are ancillary sadhanas. We had seen karma yoga to be panchamaha yajnas and a life of contribution. We saw that the one who follows karma yoga, there will not be any failure in what he does. He will get the results according to what he has done. So karma yoga is about converting the action into yoga, karma into yoga. And there are 2 major points that were mentioned. One is Ishvara Arpana. So whatever we do, we offer it to Ishvara. And Prasada Buddhi. Wherever we are enjoying wherever we are enjoying life, we offer it to Ishvara as his, and we offer it to him and take it as his prasada. So that is called as prasada buddhi. Then we move to Upasana Yoga. Upasana Yoga, meditation. We saw that there were 4 types of meditation. The 4 types of meditation were concentration meditation. Before concentration meditation, one has to relax the mind, so relaxation meditation. And then after that, expansion meditation, and then value meditation. So Upasana Yoga, Upasana gives us a focused mind now. And then with that we enter Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga, we saw, Jnana means knowledge. Jnana Yoga means knowledge of what? Knowledge of Atma, the real I. Who am I? That knowledge is called as Atma Jnana. Okay, and then we saw what is moksha. Moksha is something, we saw that it is actually contented mind. A mind that is not craving for anything. So that is called as moksha. So moksha in Advaita is here and now, when we are alive. It is not just something that has to be achieved after this life. And this moksha, we saw it is not something, it is a siddha vastu, it is not a sadhya vastu. And we saw the example of 10 people crossing the river. It is something that we have in ourselves. We know, we just don't know who we are. There is an ignorance that is covering the knowledge. So that is, and Atma Jnana is, Jnana Yoga is about removing that ignorance. And then we said, okay, if I have to remove ignorance, I will have to remove ignorance only through knowledge. And therefore, we have to study. Now, what to study? Study Shastras. So what is the relationship between studying Shastras and moksha? We saw the concepts of Pramata, Pramanam and Prameyam. We saw that all the 5 sense organs that we have as our object, as our instruments of knowledge, are all focused on the outside world. They are used by the subject, which is I, to gain knowledge of the objects, that is the world. So to really know who am I cannot use my sense organs to understand who am I. Because these pancha jnanendriyas are all external focused. And therefore, just like for an eye to see, be able to see an eye itself, it needs a mirror. And therefore the Shastras act as the mirror. The Shastras would be acting as the mirror which will tell me who am I. And therefore it will be able to remove my ignorance. And moksha is really about knowing, who am I, who I am. That is self-knowledge. And therefore, if I have to know something, I will have to get that knowledge. I have to study, I have to understand, I have to get that knowledge. So meditation, Kundalini Yoga, Sharanagati, Bhakti, those cannot be the sadhanas to know ourselves. Because the real I is Siddha Vastu, not Sadhya Vastu. And this Vedanta Shastra is the Pramanam for moksha. That will be the source, that will be the instrument of knowledge for me to get this knowledge. So now we know that Vedanta Shastra is the Pramanam. Now the next question that was asked at the end of the last class was, so why can't I study these scriptures myself? Shastras are the Pramanam, okay. but why can't I study it myself? The scriptures, the Shastras, the scriptures that we call, it is different from other forms of literature. They use a different method or a peculiar method to impart this self-knowledge. And that is because the subject matter is unique. Because the subject matter is the self. And therefore it has to have a unique method. Because normally when we study any particular subject, it deals with actually different objects, people in the creation, things in the creation, and therefore our typical orientation would be to first understand the subject, understand that what we are studying about. And let me not try to use the word subject, because although the subject means the object of knowledge, it could also confuse ourselves with the subject who is studying. So I'll try to use the word object of study. So generally we use the object when we have to study about the object. We first understand, try to get the information about the object, and then we get into the contact with the object itself, and then I experience it. I experience the object, and then I try to understand it thoroughly, fully. So first is information, then it is direct experience. So if I have to study about, say, Niagara Falls, I understand where is Niagara Falls, I take the map, I find the route to go there, I understand where it is, where should I stand. I first gather that knowledge about that object, and then I go and experience it directly. This is typically what happens. If I want to study, say for example, car driving, I will have to first understand theoretically, I have to understand what is a car, what is a brake, what is a accelerator, what is a clutch, what's a steering wheel. I understand it first theoretically, and then I experience it directly. So first is information, followed by direct experience. But in regards to the self-knowledge, it is not like that, because this information direct experience does not exist in self-knowledge. Because for direct experience I need to come in contact with that object, but here I cannot. I can never come in contact with myself, because I am the self. So I will not be able to use the same methods of learning as what typically any other subject would be allowing me to do. And therefore, our Shastras come up with a different type of operation or method called this Jnana Yoga. And therefore, this Jnana Yoga has got threefold exercises. There are three parts to it. First is called Shravanam, the second one is called Mananam, and the third one is called Nididhyasanam. Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam. Shravanam means systematic and continuous study of scriptures under a competent guide or guru over a lengthy period of time. So each word is important, I'll try to explain. Shravana means systematic and continuous study of scriptures under a competent guru over a lengthy period of time. And scriptures means here Upanishads and Vedanta. Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads and Vedanta. Vedanta can also be called Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads come under Vedanta. Okay. It is not about listening to, when I say scriptures, we should not take it as Ramayana, Mahabharata and all those things, Bhagavata. Those do not come under Jnana Yoga. Only Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita and Vedantic texts. There are other Vedantic texts as well, like Viveka Chudamani, Jiva Yatra, Kaivalya Navanitam, and all those things. Those texts come under Vedanta Shastra. So first is competent person. The teaching should be handled by someone who knows how to handle the subject and be able to remove the orientation of information and be able to give this self-knowledge which will be able to remove this ignorance. I'll repeat Shravanam. Shravanam means systematic and continuous study of scriptures under a competent guru over a lengthy period of time. It has to be systematic. It cannot be, it has to be a gradual build-up. It should start with the beginning basics and then slowly it should culminate to the end. It should not be studied as a series of stray, unconnected topics. Then we would get confused. So it should be systematic in that sense that between one topic and another topic, there should be a gradual build-up with a connection. And therefore, it has to be systematic. Otherwise, the mind will not be able to, or the intellect will not be able to understand and get convinced. And it has to be continuous. It is not good to have breaks, because remember, this is not just about knowledge, it also has to be some amount of self-transformation has to happen. And if this constant Shravana or the constant listening is important for us to be in that path. Otherwise, if we are giving some gap, it would have between one, we could go back to our old ways and we may have to start the process all over again. So it is important to be continuous, and it has to be over a lengthy period of time, because generally when Vedantic teaching happens, questions are not allowed. We do allow here, but generally what happens is we have to get the teaching end to end from all angles, in all aspects of totality, because most of the questions would be answered in subsequent classes. So it has to be done over a lengthy period of time. It's not just 1 hour class and then we get that knowledge. This process is called Shravanam. Systematic, continuous, lengthy period of time under a competent guru. When we say competent guru, it has to be a Sampradaya guru. Sampradaya guru meaning one who has learned this knowledge from another guru. It is not his own knowledge. It is not that he is able to actually bring his own thoughts into it. It has been handed over from Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. It has to be handed over through the Parampara. So it has to be through a Guru Sishya Parampara that person would have to have understood and be able to teach. So this is called as Shravanam. And Shravanam, during the period of Shravanam, one requires a lot of patience, because there are lots of concepts that are brought in. We will have to slowly figure out. There will be a lot of concepts that we could understand. There are concepts that we will not be able to understand. We will have to listen to it again and again until we understand. We should not try to be judgmental or critical about the Shastras. And that is called as Shraddha. The reason is, if we notice, most of the times, or 99 or maybe 100% of the times, whatever counterpoints we have would all be answered by Shastras, would have been already have experienced by other people who would have ensured that these things are also answered. And the Shastras they are clear in terms of what they want to convey. You would not have any doubts if we follow the Shastras in the manner that they ask us to do. So Shravanam is about exposing myself continuously to the systematic teaching over a lengthy period of time. And as I said, what does this teaching contain? Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita. And it talks about what? It talks about who I really am. Who I really am. So if I consider myself to be a Jiva, another term we are using, Jiva, then I am basically understanding about Jiva Swarupam, my Swarupam. So Upanishads talk about this, and the Upanishads also talk about the next thing, which is the world. So it will also do a Jagat Vichara. What is this world? This world, which means anything other than me. What is this world? So the Upanishads will also do a Vichara on the world. And then the third thing that the Upanishad does is it talks about Ishvara, the creator of this world, we can say. So it will also talk about Ishvara Swarupam. So it will talk about Jiva Swarupam, Jagat Vichara, and Ishvara Swarupam. And Upanishad introduces this Ishvara as the cause of Jagat. It says it will talk about the creation process also. It will say how this Ishvara has created this world. And what is the importance of this Upanishad's teaching? What is the main Tatparya? What is the real motive behind this? Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara. These three things are important, and the three things, relationships, are also explained. The conclusion that we get at the end of this is Jiva and Ishvara are really one and the same. Jiva and Ishvara are really one and the same. There is no underlying difference. And the second thing it concludes is Jagat is not real. The world that we see is not real. Brahman alone is real. In other words, in Sanskrit terms, we call this as Jiva Ishvara Aikyam. Jiva Ishvara Aikyam, which means Jiva and Ishvara are one and the same. There is no underlying difference. Superficially there will be a difference, but there is no underlying difference. And the second one is Jagat Mithya Brahma Satyam. Jagat Mithya Brahma Satyam. So the world is not real. Brahman alone is real. So this is what Upanishads teach. So this is where we will end up with the outcome. Now the question is, until when I should do this Shravanam? So until when is until the time I understand the main subject. I have to continue to listen to the Shastras, and that is called as Shravanam. Until the time I understand, I will have to keep doing Shravanam. So would it be, can I understand in one class? Maybe, may not be. Can I understand in one series of lectures? Maybe, may not be. Can I understand it in one life? Maybe, may not be. So we will have to be really patient with that. So until we understand the Tatparyam of these Upanishads, we should continue to do Shravana. And until that time, that sadhana is not complete. That is called as Shravanam. The next one is Mananam. Mananam is reflection, or I would say consolidation of whatever intellectual understanding that we get out of Shravanam. So it is a reflection of the intellectual understanding that we get out of Shravana. In other words, removing doubts also. What happens is, when we actually study this Shastras, we will see some sort of inconsistencies. We will feel that there are some inconsistencies between what we experience and this knowledge. So if I have that doubt, if I have these inconsistencies, I will try to clarify it even during the Shravanam stage. So if I have doubts around the Tatparyam, if they say, okay, Jiva Ishvara Aikyam, if I have doubts around that, I will actually try to get that clarified during the Shravanam stage itself. Then, so any experience that I get versus what I actually study, if there is any conflict, if there is any inconsistency, I try to clarify that during Shravanam. But during Mananam, what I do is, I try to tie all the ideas of Vedanta and I try to make my own garland out of it. I try to build it myself from what I have studied. And every idea that I have got, I should be able to put together in my own way of thinking. And I should be able to get that full understanding. And when I actually be able to do that, I will, when I do that, as part of it, I might get some doubts, and clarifying that doubts is called as Mananam. Because we have, say for example, we have understood now what is Karma Yoga, what is Upasana Yoga. So I should be able to say, what is Karma Yoga? Why do I need Karma Yoga for moksha? What is the relationship? What is the relationship between Upasana Yoga and moksha? So everything should fall in its place. Why do I need Varnas? Why do I need Chatur Varnas? Why do I need Ishvara? Why do I need to do Bhakti? What is the relationship between Bhakti and moksha? What is the relationship between Brahmacharya Ashrama and moksha? I should be able to create that. I should be able to see that everything should fall in its place. Doubts will surely arise, because when I look at a topic individually, doubts may not arise. But when I try to connect, then I might get seeming contradictions. So I try to listen back again to Shravana. I do Shravana again. I try to clarify my doubts. And if I still have those doubts, then I bring out the questions. And generally our scriptures are such that most of the scriptures, most of the Upanishads are in the form of a dialogue. It is like a Guru Sishya Samvada. It is normally a dialogue between Guru and Sishya. And therefore, if we look at it, in our scriptures, we give full freedom to a rational mind, a logical mind, a scientific mind. It will try to answer everything from all these three angles. Any questions could be answered, and the teacher is available to answer the student and removing all kinds of doubts that the students have, because any doubt will be an obstacle to the knowledge. So Mananam is a sadhana to remove the seeming contradictions. I would say use the word seeming because there are actually no contradictions. But when we study, we might seem to see some inconsistencies. We might see some contradictions between the Shastra Tatparyam and the Pramanas. Pramanas meaning my instrument of experience. For example, in Advaita we say Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. But Buddhism says Shunya. The world, there is nothing called Brahman. So how do we contradict? But those are all higher forms of knowledge. Once we get to that stage, we can actually try to answer them. If there is a conflict within the Vedanta Shastra itself, then we will have to clarify that using in the Shravanam mode itself. If there is a conflict between Shastra and Anubhava, Anubhava means what? Experience. Then it has to be thought through and resolved. For example, Shastra says, I am Purnaha. An individual is Purna. Purna means infinite. But I feel limited by my experience. But Shastra says, I am the nature of total bliss. It says Satchidananda Swarupa, you are. But I don't feel happy. I feel I am in sorrow. So there seems to be contradiction between what Shastra says and what I experience. So then I have to think through this and I have to understand through Mananam, and then I will say, okay, I consider myself from my body-mind point of view. From my body-mind point of view, I am limited. I am sorrowful. But the Shastras say it from the Atma point of view. And at the Atma point of view, I am Purnaha. And I am Satchidananda Swarupa. So there is no contradiction. So I will think through and remove all these seeming contradictions. Vedanta encourages asking any number of questions. Because Vedanta is knowledge. It is not about faith or a belief system. It is not a belief system. Only in system of faith or belief, questions are discouraged. Because then it is considered disrespectful to the teacher or the teaching. But in our tradition, questions are to be asked until our doubts subside. So when can I claim that I have complete knowledge or without any doubt? How do I know that all my doubts are subsided? Only when I am able to say that I am Atma, Aham Brahmasmi, I am immortal, I am all pervading, I do not have death, I survive the death of this body. The world cannot affect me at all. Only if I am able to say that with conviction, each one of these statements, only then I can say, okay, I have my knowledge, I am complete with my Mananam. I have no more doubts. So now this knowledge is my knowledge. It is in my intellect now. So I should ask my intellect whether I am convinced, and it should say yes. So hence Mananam removes all the obstacles in the intellect and makes this knowledge into doubtless knowledge. So Mananam is the process of getting conviction. It is it is solving the intellectual problem. Because normally our intellect will not accept until all the doubts are cleared. And Mananam is the process where we get all the doubts clarified, clear. So Shravanam is getting knowledge. So it is about removing ignorance. So Shravanam is about removing ignorance. Mananam is about removing doubts. So those are the first two steps. Shravanam, Mananam. Then the third step is Nididhyasanam. Nididhyasanam is contemplation, assimilation. In other words, we can say transformation of the emotions that we feel. So Nididhyasanam is process of where I internalize this knowledge, I assimilate this knowledge, and I remove my habitual behavior. So some people might ask, okay, if I read any other subject, it is normally Shravanam and Mananam, right? I read, and then if I have doubts, I get it clarified. There ends it. We don't have a third step called Nididhyasanam in any subject that we study. But only for Atma Jnana, we have this concept of Nididhyasana. So why do we need to do Nididhyasana? Because when we own up to this Atma, the Shastra says you are not this body and mind, you are this Atma. I have to negate my body and mind. I have to say I am not this body, I am not this mind. So I have to negate this body and mind. And I have to negate this body and mind without destroying or removing this body and mind. This body and mind will continue to remain. We will have this body and mind, and yet I should be in a position to negate them. But then what happens is, typically due to old habit, we might end up owning up to this body and mind at times, because out of habit, because this habit is not there only for this 50, 40, 30, 60 years, whatever we are in. It has been this habit for multiple janmas. For multiple janmas, I have been owning up to this body and mind. Now I suddenly have to own up to the Atma, and I have to negate this body and mind. And I have not come out of this body and mind. I am still having this body and mind. And while retaining this body and mind, I claim myself to be Atma. And therefore, to remove this habitual behavior that I might go back to, I will have to ensure that I don't go back to this habitual behavior. I remove this habitual behavior. In other words, I assimilate this knowledge completely. Just like, only a digested food becomes nourishing to the body. Similarly, only this assimilated knowledge can help me to own up to Atma. And therefore, Nididhyasanam is an important step. Unless this Aham Brahmasmi becomes my personality, my Swabhava, I will not be able to get the full benefits of moksha. Or rather, I would not be in moksha stage yet. So Nididhyasanam is solving, and when I actually own up to this Atma, naturally as a side effect, I would be solving all the emotional problems that I have. With this knowledge, in one go, I will be solving all my emotional problems. There will be no samsara for me. There is no more this emotional turmoil for me. There is no more this chanchalam in my mind. My mind is calm. I am contented. And that can happen only if I am able to fully assimilate, internalize this knowledge. What sort of emotional problems are we talking about here? To remove these emotional problems, the basic problem that we have is ajnanam. Ajnanam means ignorance. Ignorance of who am I. And that actually, the effect of it is in the form of raga, dvesha, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, madha, matsarya. And also bhaya. You can also add fear in it. So any kind of likes, dislikes, lust, anger, greed, delusion, all those things are envy, fear. All these things are effects of samsara. These are all emotional problems. These are all problems that I have in my mind. So once I assimilate this knowledge, I will be able to come out of these problems totally. That process is called as nididhyasana. So today we are all samsari. We are petty, ignorant, bitter. From there we have to go to the stage of moksha where we are infinite happiness. We enjoy infinite happiness. So nididhyasana is a process by which I convert my jnana, which is my knowledge, into jnana nishta, into a knowledge with conviction, knowledge with full conviction and assimilation. And what is this process of nididhyasana? How do I do nididhyasana? Nididhyasana is normally done through a dhyana. Dhyana is the normal, usual sadhana. Dhyana meaning meditation, where I am able to convert jnana into jnana nishta. So when I say dhyana, it refers to meditation. And dhyana is referring to both upasana as well as nididhyasana. We saw upasana yoga, which is also meditation. That meditation is different from this meditation. That upasana is about saguna upasana, which means I am actually doing meditation on objects with a name and form. Here nididhyasana is about nirguna upasana, where I am doing meditation on Brahman. So there is, both are meditation, but the object of meditation is different. Another way to do nididhyasana is to keep in touch with Shastra. So even if I complete my study, which is Shravana, I keep listening to Shastras, I keep myself in Satsanga, I keep myself with Shastra Sangha, and therefore through that also I would be able to influence my personality and ensure that I don't go back to my habitual behavior. The third thing is, I always lead an alert life. For any spiritual seeker, having an alert life is very important. An alert life meaning an awareness, a life of awareness in terms of where am I? Is this satsanga or dursanga? Is this something that I have to speak or not speak? This thought in my mind, is it good or bad? Should I actually add fuel to this thought, or should I actually kill this thought? Should I speak or not speak? Should I hear to this or not hear this? Should I do this or not do this? Am I able to remember Bhagavan frequently? This is called as an alert life. Every response that I am actually making, I should be able to monitor that response. I monitor my response in every situation, and I govern it using the new teaching that I have got. I have studied Shastra. This is what Shastra says, and I will actually validate my response through the Shastras that I have studied. And then my response will go through that prism before it is actually sent out. So that is known as having an alert life. So that is called as, those are the three different steps for Nididhyasana. But as I said, alert life is needed for every spiritual seeker at any point of time. And as I said, assimilated knowledge alone nourishes me. Just like assimilated food alone nourishes the body. So it doesn't matter the amount of food that I ate, right? What matters is how much has it been properly digested. Similarly, it doesn't matter how much of Shastra I read, I study. It is a question of how much I have been able to assimilate out of it, how much I have been able to make it my personality. Swami Chinmayananda puts it, when somebody said to him that, look, Swamiji, I have actually gone through Gita 10 times. I have studied Gita end to end 10 times. I have listened to all your lectures 10 times. He said, wonderful. But how much of Gita has gone inside you is the real question. So conversion of this intellectual knowledge, right now it is all intellectual curiosity. Some may have intellectual curiosity. So having this intellectual knowledge, curiosity is good to start with. But converting this knowledge into our emotional strength, that is where real spirituality is about. So this is Jnana Yoga. When I said emotional strength, question could come, what is this emotional strength? And where do I get this emotional strength from? Normally we have emotional problems, right? And these emotional problems, they express in two forms. One, choiceless situations. There are so many choiceless situations in our life. We don't have a choice on where we are born, how we are born, the color, our body structure, and a lot of things. We require acceptance for that. We need to have acceptance. So that is called as emotional strength. We should have sufficient emotional strength to accept these choiceless situations. The other is where we have choice, which can be changed or improved. In that situation, an strong emotional mind would be one which does not obstruct my effort to change the situation. So if I have emotional strength, it will not obstruct the effort to change the situation. So that is called as emotional strength. And what is a weak mind? A weak mind, if there is a choiceless situation, the weak mind goes on saying, don't accept it, don't accept it. Which means we end up mumbling and grumbling all the time. Because we will not be able to change the situation, because it is choiceless, and we are not in a position to accept also. So our mind is constantly mumbling and grumbling. We are always in the state of a depressed, angry, dejected mode. And that is called as a weak mind. If the mind is weak and worrying over the choiceless situation, then what happens is, even if there is a situation where we can actually change, the mind is actually spending time on worrying about things where we cannot improve, it loses the opportunity to improve the situations where there is an opportunity. So worrying about choiceless situations becomes an obstacle. Hence, I should be in a position to know what are my choiceless situations, know what are my situations where I have a choice, and be able to focus only on the situations that I can change. That is called as emotional strength. We'll have to face the situation. If the situation is a choiceless one, I learn to accept it, I learn to forget it, and I go for the next one. And if it is a situation where I can change, I try to change, I try to improve the situation to the extent possible. There too I may find a limitation. The moment I find a limitation, I accept it, I move on. I don't grumble, I accept it, I move on. That is called as emotional strength. So like a bulldozer, we face the day-to-day life with emotional strength. And this emotional strength can be got by Vedantic knowledge. This Vedanta will help us to build this emotional strength. So once a sadhaka basically completes Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam, coming back to this Jnana Yoga, once he completes this Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam, he becomes a Sthita Prajna or a Jnana Nishta. We saw Jnana Nishta. Another word for it is Sthita Prajna. Prajna means Jna means knowledge. Jna means knowledge. Prajna means doubtless knowledge. Sthita Prajna means assimilated, fully assimilated, doubtless convict knowledge. Jnana Nishta, we can say. So Shravanam, Mananam and Nididhyasanam is called as Jnana Yoga. This Jnana Yoga is about self-knowledge. Self-knowledge gives us moksha. Moksha gives us emotional strength. Emotional strength helps us to deal with life and be happy here and now. And this Jnana Yoga is the subtlest form of sadhana among these three. It requires a subtle mind, it requires a subtle intellect and a pure mind. And to get that subtle intellect and a pure mind, one has to do Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga. So, with that we come to an end of this Jnana Yoga topic. I'll take questions now. Can you please repeat the full Shravanam? I think I did. Do you still need Sundar? Should I consider the Guru as Sampradaya Guru? Yes, I also answered that, I think. Parampara, Sampradaya Guru. But many a times the acceptance of situations emotionally is for the moment to move on. But later on the mind is not able to let go actually and keeps churning it in the mind. How to become strong? Very true. I speaking from my experience, I would say constant Shravanam and doing sadhanas like Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga would be able to understand and let go of things quite easily. Consistently, if we do this sadhanas, that what the Shastras say, if we are able to do this Shravana to start with and make some small adjustments to our life, we will be able to see big differences. Could you repeat what is Sthita Prajna? Jna means jnana or knowledge. Prajna means doubtless knowledge. Sthita Prajna means one who has got this knowledge completely embedded. Assimilated, a fully assimilated. So Sthita Prajna. How do we do Karma Yoga and Upasana in daily life? I think I have answered that in the respective classes. Karma Yoga is about doing Panchamaha Yajna, Deva Yajna, Rishi Yajna, Pitru Yajna, Bhuta Yajna, Manushya Yajna, the Panchamaha Yajnas. So doing that, maybe you can go back and listen to those two topics. Upasana is about meditation, doing relaxation meditation to start with, and then do a focused meditation. And then for focused meditation also I gave 3 steps. Basically Manasa Parayana, Manasa Puja, Manasa Japa, and then do expansion meditation, value meditation. Karma Yoga is, see, for Upasana Yoga you need to allocate some time. You need to allocate some time to do Upasana. I have to do meditation. So I have to come at morning 9 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever, or 5 o'clock in the morning. I have to sit and do Upasana or meditation. For Karma Yoga it is not like that. Every act of mind can be converted into Karma Yoga. We have already seen that. If you want to know more about Karma Yoga, I suggest start attending Gita class also. Because in Gita all these concepts would be explained much more in detail and would give much more tips as well. So first let's finish this introduction to Gita by Vedanta. Then we would be probably elaborating much more in Gita. Any other question? So do Karma Yoga. Basically every act that we do, make sure that you do Ishvara Arpana. Make sure that you offer it to Ishvara. Say, I am not doing for this person, I am doing it for Ishvara. And whenever you receive any result out of it, take it as prasada. Take it as Ishvara prasada. Take it as if it is being given by Ishvara. So which means I will not judge, I will not crib, I will not feel proud also. So any result that I get, I will be able to accept it humbly. Any other? Okay. So next week we will go into something more. We will talk about, from next week we will talk about Bhakti. What is Bhakti? We will see that in the next class. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Swasti Prajabhya Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahim Mahishaha. Gobrahmanebhyo Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah.